episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. To be joined by none other than Ken Shamrock, widely regarded as one of the biggest stars in the history of mixed martial arts, an icon and pioneer of the sport, and the very first athlete elected to the UFC Hall of Fame. He is widely known for his participation in the Ultimate Fighting Championships, World Wrestling Federation, Pride Fighting, Pancrase, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, and during his career earned the title of the world's most dangerous man. Over his career, Mr. Shamrock garnered no fewer than 14 world and other major championships. He is the founder of the Lion's Den Mixed Martial Arts Training Camp, which is a mixed martial arts team and training facility with its headquarters in Reno, Nevada, with additional training facilities both in Arizona and Connecticut. In addition to his MMA career, Mr. Shamrock is one of the very few trainers that has been allowed to teach U.S. military troops self-defense. He currently serves as a subject matter expert, both the U.S. Marine Corps Martial Arts Training Program, and he is regularly asked to train Army troops as well. When he's not doing that, he travels to meet routinely with wounded warriors. Mr. Shamrock is the author of several books, including Inside the Lion's Den, Beyond the Lion's Den, and his latest book, A Life Story of Ken Shamrock, is due to be released this year in 2020. And he's also actively involved in children's issues, which he considers of a paramount importance, specifically troubled children, at-risk children. And he freely donates his time to meet with kids in schools, juvenile facilities, hospitals, churches.
Introduce me and say some of the things that I'm involved with. That was with somebody actually hearing somebody say that. Wow, I guess that's a whole lot.
Well, you're definitely doing quite a bit. Obviously, there's no one in sort of the fans of the sport that don't know who you are. But for some of the folks that listen to this show that may listen to some of the other topics, can you take a few minutes just to sort of go into the early days, a little bit about where you grew up, your time in the Bob Shamrock home, a little bit of your early football career, and sort of your early time in the Marines that led up to sort of your decision to become a mixed martial artist?
Yeah, at 5 years old in Macon, Georgia, was where I was born, Warner Robins. And in that time, my biological mother and my biological father went along. My biological mom was like 18 or 19 years old. She had 3 kids, me and my 2 older brothers. And we were growing up in this neighborhood where it was predominantly African American. So we were constantly fighting, constantly in trouble. My biological mom was never really around much to raise us as far as we remember. We were constantly in trouble and getting into fights, getting in all kinds of things. And, with a single mom who was trying to make ends meet, trying to get a job, especially 1964 to 69, I believe it would be. Women getting jobs and stuff. So trying to raise a family and do all the things she was doing was really hard for her. So needless to say that the raising part was in lack of. So we kind of raised ourselves. We were rough on the streets. She met a guy in the Air Force that flew helicopters. Ended up meeting him. I don't even remember. It was a month to 6 months later. We were loaded up in a car and heading to Napa, California, which is 3,000 miles away. The trailer on the back, heading to a new place, new home, new environment, predominantly all white. Didn't get along there because of the way we talked, the way we acted, the southern accent. Got into fights there. We had a person that was really strict as opposed to nobody. There was a lot of clashes, a lot of fighting, a lot of abuse. Ran away from home along with my 2 other brothers, older brothers. They ended up running away from home. My 2 brothers, they went in and they went in and out of jail and out of placements. My One of my older brothers just got out of prison. He got a sentence of 20 years. This was his third time in prison. He just got out about 6 months ago. So he spent most of his time incarcerated along with my other brother, along with myself. When I was in group homes, I was in a group home all the way until I was 18 years old. Ended up at the Shamrock Boys Ranch, that's where my life changed. Met Bob Shamrock, who then became my father, adopted me, and showed me the right way to live and the right way to do things. And went to college, but in between all of that, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of violence. So I was definitely a hard person. And when I finally got to a point where I could live a normal life, there was still a lot of anger and scars that were inside. So during the time I was 18 till I was probably 25 or so, I was very angry. I took all my anger out of the sports, which didn't make me very good at sports because I had someplace to vent it. And so I felt important through sports. I felt like I was, wasn't just another scrub coming off the street. People would look at me and they see the importance and value in me because I could tackle somebody or I could hit somebody and play football. All of a sudden I became valuable, and so I used that to my advantage to get into college and to be able to access other opportunities and being able to learn schoolwork that people helping me and tutoring me. And so I use that as leverage for sports because they wanted me on the field. I had to have good grades. So I was able to learn. Went to Shasta College, did 3 years there. Ended up having an opportunity to go over to Japan and fight in the Pancrase organization. Had my first fight. Once I got a taste of the crowd and the fighting, I never looked back after that. Then came 2.5 years into Japan. The UFC came out. I applied to that because I was a champion in Japan. Once I hit the UFC and had my first fight at the UFC, I found another arena in which I fell in love with, the bare knuckle, all the no holds barred stuff. I just loved it. And then I started focusing on becoming the champion there, just as I did in the Pancrase. When I went there, I focused on being the best. I did. And then UFC, I focused on being the best there, and I did.
Awesome. Over your career, you've practiced many different styles of fighting over the years. I believe you started, as a wrestler, and then you did the shoot fighting, which allowed, different types of strikes and locks and whatnot, into the MMA, where many other things are allowed. And now with sort of the bare knuckle boxing and the Valor, it seems that sort of things have come at least, full circle, or at least going back to the 100 years now. I've heard you talk on previous shows about how this is it's not just traditional boxing without gloves. I mean, you can hit somebody, of course, with a fist, and that can be abrasive. But if you hit somebody wrong with the bare fist, you can break your hand and so forth. Talk a little bit about sort of Valor, why sort of this is sort of the next phase of sort of combat sports that you're interested in developing.
Well, when I first started out in Japan, in the open hand strikes and the submissions, I felt like it was pure. I mean, you didn't have to have a glove on your hand, and you didn't have to have anything to make it better. It was just your body in there, and you went in, and it was just pure. And then UFC came out, and then it was closed fists, and now people were punching each other in the head. And I remember when I first did it, I was like, under the opening strikes, I understood, right? I was like, okay, if I hit a guy in the head, my hand's open, I'm going to break my hand. So I kind of under the opening strike, I understood that. But then when the UFC came out, they were allowing people to punch to the head. I had to think another thought about it. I'm thinking, well, man, that's barbaric. But then once I started studying and learning the strikes and learning how to hit the right spots, I realized that you have to be so much better, so much more accurate with your striking when you're punching bare knuckle, that you have to be able to work on your accuracy, because if you don't, just like in the early UFCs or Garnered, actually put a foot in his tooth and he hurt his hand. And a lot of guys or they even keep hacking. There's a lot of guys end up hurting their hands because they were going in there and they were throwing wildly and they weren't really paying attention to the accuracy. Therefore, they were hitting the hard bone in the head and they were damaging their hands and they weren't able to continue on to the next round. I looked at it early on and go, okay, if you're going to throw a punch, you need to make sure the punch isn't as hard. Make sure that you're accurate wherever you're throwing that strike. But if you happen to miss, you're not throwing full speed, so you end up breaking your hand. That you're controlling your punches and you're controlling your accuracy. And therefore, it makes it much, much more exciting. And you have to also make sure that the worst thing I see is to have somebody go in there and be able to knock somebody out and they threw a bad punch. But they got rewarded because they were learning to go out. To me, bare knuckle is more pure. It's more real. And I believe it's going to really separate amateurs from pros.
Very cool. Very interesting. One of the things when one thinks of combat sports like MMA, boxing, and so forth, you usually hear the expression, this is a young man's game. But, you obviously bucked the trend. I mean, you've been actively competing into your 50s. Obviously, one looks at boxing and sees someone like a George Foreman or whatever. Could you talk a little bit about, first of all, sort of how, as you aged, how your style of training, the intensity, diet, even sort of mental preparation got, changed for you over time as you competed. And then also, in recent days, we were seeing, all this news about, Mike Tyson coming back and Evander Holyfield. Any advice that you may give to some people like that think they can take 20 years off and and pop back in and fight like they did when they were in their 20s?
First of all, when you're younger, you usually get away with a little bit more when it comes to diet, rest, but as you get more seasoned and you're a little more experienced in there, you realize, especially when you're starting to fight all the best fighters, everybody is good because you're either world champion or you're a number one contender. So everybody that you fight is going to be good. So therefore, everything that you do for your training, whether it be rest, whether it be diet, whether it be working on different techniques, conditioning, all that stuff becomes more valuable and more important as your career and you start rising up to the top. You have to dial everything in. And so for me, that's what it was. It was just time. But as time went on, too, then the sport changed. For instance, when I was doing it, man, we would go in there and we would take guys down that were strikers and we'd submit them. And then, of course, the strikers started realizing a few years into it is that they got to learn how to defend the takedown. So they had more opportunities to be able to get punches rather than just get taken down right away and submitted. So they started working on takedowns. Hence, Maurice Smith, with several other guys who also worked on defending takedowns, being able to strike. Hence, Pride with all the guys coming from K1. Learning how to defend takedowns, being able to kick and punch and strike, and having multiple opportunities because they're not going to be taken down right away because they learned to defend the takedown. Well, then the striker now starts to dominate because now the grapplers are being held to their feet. So now the grapplers, this is the way the trend was, then the grapplers started learning how to fake a shot, set up their punches, be able to throw punches off a fake shot, and then throw punches and then shoot off that. So then the grapplers started doing strikes and started learning how to set up shots off strikes. So you saw that transition, man, and it was interesting to watch it to see kickboxers starting to win. And then you started seeing them going back the other way. The strikers were starting to lose because the grapplers were starting to learn how to punch and how to fake shots and throw punches. And so then all of a sudden we're where we're at now, where it's that everybody knows to strike, and they know takedowns, and they know grappling. And that's what it did. That's the trend. That's the trend that it set, was that grapplers dominated immediately. Then kickboxers learned to defend. And then they started winning. And then the grapplers started realizing that they were working on shots and defending those shots. So then they started faking shots and throwing punches, which then got the strikers to have to stand a little bit more straight up rather than crouch down and just stop the shot. And now we are where we're at today, whereas
things that you've talked about in public, obviously you've competed for for a few decades now. Obviously, these sports come with a lot of glory, but a lot of injury and pain. You've talked a little bit about your need for the stem cell treatments later in your career for knee injuries and neck injuries and so forth. Talk a little bit about how that went, sort of the degree of relief and sort of rejuvenation that helped you with in your career. And then I was just wondering if you think that some of these tools, some of the, I said sort of work in the regenerative medicine space. Do you think this is going to sort of alter the sport in some ways, of sort of the younger guys start using these tools to recover earlier in their careers, if we're going to sort of see sort of the super MMA stars start evolving in the sport because of these technologies?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that athletes should really look and start taking this type of stuff serious, because it really does help you recover. I know with me, it was a miracle. It really took years off my life for me to be able to get back out and do what I'm doing now today. So the stem cells are amazing. But at the same time, it's not like it only takes 30 days. You start feeling it, or 3 months. It's a process, 6 months to a year, and it constantly keeps gradually getting better. So it's more of a patient thing. But I really thought that it was a big-time game changer for me, being able to get me back out there and be able to compete and have fun doing what I love doing, and that's getting in the ring and competing and having fun and entertaining the audience. So for that, I'm very appreciative. But yeah, I think it's a huge advantage to anyone that will look in that direction and start taking that serious, because it really does work, man. But it's subtle. It's not something that just jumps out at you. It's gradual. It starts to work, and it's effective for you over a period of time. So it'd be interesting to see when these athletes start looking at that in a more serious manner, because it does work.
Really cool. Can you talk a little bit about your training of the military troops in self-defense? Because normally when I sort of think of this, watch movies like Clint Eastwood and Heartbreak Ridge and all that, I think of sort of hand-to-hand combat with knives, or maybe techniques that may have been more reserved for like the early UFC, what was allowed in the early UFC. Are you teaching sort of more traditional self-defense, or are these sort of off-limit stuff that you can't do in the octagon?
Well, I think a little both, but the first thing I would say is that a lot of times these guys get people to come in and they teach them these other disciplines, and they go in and they'll teach them, and they'll roll around and they'll teach them all these techniques. And the one thing that I did at the very first was I put on the flak jacket and I put on the gear, and I started rolling around to see what was going to work for them, with the type of gear that they would have on in a combat situation. And so therefore I was able to teach them things that they could use in combat that would help them in a hand-to-hand combat with their gear on. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people that do go in there and they start working with some of this military is that they don't put that gear on. They don't experience what these guys have to have on while they're in a combat situation. They start teaching these things that they're not capable of doing with that type of gear on. So for me, I had a great opportunity to be able to do that and be able to, see what will actually work for them while they're in a combat situation with all that gear on.
Really neat. Really neat. Can you talk a little bit about your work with the at-risk children? I know I was doing some reading that I think you were trying to rebuild sort of the Shamrock Ranch model, trying to reduce youth incarceration, things like wilderness therapy and combined with martial arts and so forth. I know this is really important to you. Can you talk a little bit what's going on right now with all this?
Yeah, right there, that's on kind of the back burner right now. I'm trying to get the Valor organization up and going. Mm-hmm. And once I can get that up and it's going full speed, then I will use Valor and other things to be able to start doing opportunities for kids that are at risk to be able able to watch, maybe even training and go through different types of disciplines that fighters have to do in order to get prepared to go into a fight, which will teach these kids, the discipline and timing and all the things you need to know. Because I really think that's an important part to these younger kids who have never really been raised, and if they have, it's been through systems, to be able to like disciplined and have to have some control over things that they're doing, getting up on time, going to training, days you don't want to go, you push yourself anyways. And seeing the reward that they get from doing that within 6 months, 3 to 6 months, they see what the side effects of that is, and that is, one, getting in better shape, learning the moves, and being much more prepared in a self-defense situation. And they have watch that all play out. These kids, all of a sudden, their minds start changing because they're starting to see the results from hard work, which is something they've never done before. So once we get an opportunity to get Valor up and going strong, that's going to be my goal, is to be able to bring some of these kids into these different areas, and more violent ones, too, the ones that are out there fighting and doing all this other stuff, and getting them on the mat, and getting them to hit bags, and doing all those things to vent that frustration into something positive.
Outstanding. And along that same line, I know you've been traveling, doing a lot of talking with regard to your ministry. Can you talk a little bit about that? How's that going? Obviously, not a lot of traveling right now, but this is a very important part of your life in recent years.
Yeah, ministry is my opportunity to be able to talk to people about the things that I went through, as a kid and as an adult, and how I was able to get through those situations. And so that's something that's really important to me, because I think it's important that I'm able to share the success stories of how I was able to go through the things I went through and still remain where I'm at, because I went through some pretty bad things. And then even when I got older and I was in control of my own life, I also kind of went almost back to that dirty well, whereas I started rolling around in the dirt again. So and being able to tell my testimony and going to churches and work with at-risk kids and the youth programs, and even in the congregation, being able to let them know, hey, without me being able to have a relationship with Christ, I would never have been able to get through the things that I had gotten through without the help of my Lord and Savior. And so for me, it's an important thing that people know who I am as a person outside of the ring, and the things that I feel were important to get me where I'm at today.
Wonderful. And just two last questions, Ken. Obviously, Bob Shamrock had a major impact on your life, your ministry. Any other important mentors in your life that you might want to mention in terms of coaches, other athletes that you've trained with over the years that were sort of really integral to making Ken Shamrock who Ken Shamrock is today?
I would say that I developed a lot of different relationships in my time, and again, the book that I have coming out called Shamrock, Jonathan Snowden had written the book. It does talk a lot about some of the ups and the downs in my life, and so I've had a roller coaster, in that I've developed good relationships and bad relationships. I can't ever just go to one person and say, well, that person helped me, that person helped me. The one consistent thing that has always been there and that will always be there is Jesus Christ himself. Anything other than that, it's irrelevant. My wife, obviously, that I'm with today, I've known her since she was 10 and I was 13. We had a relationship as friends early in my life, and we developed that friendship even later on. And then, of course, we became husband and wife now, and she's a big part of mine, being able to stay and stay the course and do the right things. And my father, even though it was a difficult and a very complicated relationship with my father, He went through a lot of stuff after he had gotten divorced with his wife Dee Dee, and he was very confused in a lot of different ways. And I felt like I was the one there that was holding him up and helping him do some different things, when it's obviously been the other way around. But he had done so much for me as a teenager and saved my life that, I just felt like that was my responsibility. And so therefore I did take care of him and make sure that, I had to also make sure that I was in the right places. And thank goodness to my wife, she was able to help me with that. So really, if you look at it and all the things that I've gone through, and having mentors or not mentors, is I think it's just people that have been along each and every step of the way. There have been different people in different situations that were able to say or do something that would wake me up, that would allow me to go back where I'm supposed to be going, get back into that direction I'm supposed to be going, and not necessarily anything that was long term or something that for 10 years. It just wasn't like that. It was just all these different people who would say something at the right time, at the right moment. But the longest standing person, obviously my wife, but my father, he passed on and he's in heaven now. But he was the solid factor in my life that I could always go to and talk to him, and he would always know the right things to say.
Beautiful. Okay, I just have one other question for you. I typically on the show, I usually give my kids the background to who I'm talking to, and my sons went crazy when when they heard I was going to be speaking with you today. And they came up from my 16-year-old. He wanted me to hand you the fantasy match question. This was the question: if we could send Ken Shamrock anywhere in time to fight Bruce Lee or John L. Sullivan or a young Helio Gracie, what is Ken Shamrock's fantasy fight? Provided you were in the UFC 1 fighting shape.
Oh yeah, you got to go. You got to go with the biggest star out of all of them. Even though I don't know if he would be the toughest one, but I think that he would probably be the biggest star out of all of them, and that would be Bruce Lee.
Okay. Tim, I really appreciate your time today. I know you have a lot going on. It's been really a fun discussion. Hearing your story, truly one of perseverance and overcoming so many things, and you really, I mean, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show, but also obviously thanking you for over the years giving us such entertainment in the sport, but at the same time now spreading your really positive word to everybody, including the children. And it's been a real pleasure and honor talking to you today. So really thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule again to come on our show.